All right, everyone, welcome back to my channel. This is a long overdue video, and this is where I fully explain in detail exactly how I found out at 38 years old that I am stage 2B triple negative breast cancer. A lot of people have been asking. I've already been documenting my journey up to this point. I am 2 months into chemo at this point, but I do think it would be very, very helpful for me to share exactly how I found out. Okay, so the story actually begins back in August of 2022, and at that point I made the decision that after living in Maryland my whole entire life, I was going to temporarily move to Houston, Texas. Pretty much was just feeling untethered, so I was like, I'm gonna go literally just because I can. And it was more of a it is what it is till it ain't type of thing. So my contract for my job ended in September. I rounded everything up and I moved down here in October. I did move down here without a job, and that is important. I moved down here without a job. I had some money saved up, not a lot, but I'm sorry, my resume is stellar and I didn't think I would be out of work as long as I was. So therefore I did not have health insurance. So because I knew I was coming down here in October, I have a history of health issues already, reproductive issues. So I have endometriosis, I have like 3 fibroids, I have had 2 separate surgeries to remove polyps. And as a result of that, I was on birth control after my last surgery in April of 22. I made sure I went to the doctor and got, all of those things checked out and got an annual exam before I moved down here. As a part of that annual exam, I did have a breast exam and there was absolutely nothing. So fast forward, I'm down here in Houston. I'm looking for a job vigorously. Now we're in December. And it was just like a random Sunday night in December. I was laying in the bed and I felt a lump. I felt a lump and it was super duper tiny, but I have never felt anything before. So immediately to me, I don't play with anything. I was just like, what the fuck is this? It was giving Sesame Street. Which one is not like the other? It didn't belong. I was just completely freaked out and I didn't know. And my period was supposed to come. So I found the lump like on a Sunday and my period was supposed to come maybe by like Wednesday or Thursday. And my period never came, which is very out of the ordinary for me because I am super duper regular on or off the pill and I was on birth control. So I was like, where the fuck is my period? It doesn't make any sense. Like a girlfriend of mine, I told her, like I found like this really tiny lump and my period's supposed to come. And she said, oh, it's probably just a hormonal cyst. You said your period's supposed to come, don't sweat it. I was still sweating it. My period doesn't come at all for December. My period comes back in January with a vengeance. But between December and January, the size of the lump grew significantly. I want to say maybe like 3 to 4 times the size that I felt it. So when I found it in December, it was like pea size. It was very, very tiny. 3 to 4 times the size of that, like within a month. So now I'm kind of freaking out. So leave it to the IG algorithm. This ad popped up in my IG stories for a company called HerScan. And what HerScan does is they do breast ultrasounds for some people who may not have medical coverage or things like that. And they travel around the country and they do these appointments and you pay out of pocket for a breast ultrasound, not just a mammogram, an ultrasound. So some women have dense breast tissue and ultrasounds make it easier to see things that may go missed. So I was like, well, I got my credit card, and I think it was a little under $300. So I paid out of pocket for that. I'm not shading the company at all. However, for women who use it and they don't have health insurance, if they do see something and if they tell you need to go see a doctor, well, bitch, I don't have a doctor. They said that there was like a clogged duct in my left breast, and in my right breast, they were just like, a little tiny. They were like, a lump. They're really not sure what it is, but get a second opinion, go see a doctor. So they send you the scans. So I had the scans on a printout, like a printout report, and they gave me a a CD, a disc, so if anybody else needed to see the images. So I had that. So that was January. February, I started working again, and my insurance kicked in on March 1st. So it's still steadily growing at this point. It's getting larger, it's getting a little bit harder, but outside of that, I don't really have any other symptoms. I'm not in pain. There's no rash. There's no puckering of the skin. There's no discharge from my nipple. It's just a lump. I'm still kind of thinking, you know, maybe this is hormonal. There were other things that I felt that were wrong with my body. I'm very, very in tune with my body. And one of the biggest things was I was eating very, very clean. And I was working out 4 days a week between Pilates and weightlifting and cardio. And I know my body. I couldn't drop weight. And I felt swollen, and I felt like I was carrying more weight than I should. And I just knew, because I know my body, I was like, something is wrong. So I didn't feel good in general. So what was important to me when I did find a doctor, I wanted an internist. I didn't want just a regular PCP. I wanted an internist because I wanted someone who understood how the body works in systems and how systems interact with each other. So found a doctor, an amazing doctor. I literally almost cried in my first appointment because she heard everything that I had to say, all the issues that I've had up to this point. So she just said, I'm not letting you leave here without a full blood panel workup. I'm scheduling an ultrasound for your kidney because I've always had kidney issues since I was 18. She felt the lump. She said, absolutely not. I'm scheduling you for ultrasound and a breast ultrasound and a mammogram as well. Okay, great. So I'm like, okay, my thing is get to the bottom of it. Even if it is hormonal, I need to get to the bottom of it. My mammogram and ultrasound was originally scheduled for March 31st. And then I get there and they're like, your appointment's canceled. And I'm like, why? And they're like, well, we canceled it. For what? And they were like, is your doctor looking for something specifically? And I said, yes. And they said, okay, well, this location only does general screening. If they're actually looking for something, you got to go to the Big Boy Center. You got to go to Smith Center. And I said, okay. And they were like, well, now we can't get you in until April 17th. And I'm like, what the fuck? So now I'm basically waiting another 2 to 3 weeks. My anxiety is already high because I just want to know what's going on. But still, really no symptoms. I just wanted answers. Now it's the top of April. It's like the first or second week of April. And I'm laying in the bed one night, watching a documentary, minding my business. And then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, it feels like someone stabbed me in my nipple and shot fire through my titty. And then I was balled up in pain. The lump she's firing off. She's doing the most. I'm literally damn near in tears because I'm like, what the fuck is going on? And I'm like, do I wake up my roommate Darian? Do I go to urgent care? And then I was like, no, I already know how this works. If I go to urgent care is only acute care. They only treat the symptoms in the moment. They don't get to the root of anything. I already knew if I went there, I'm gonna have to spend a lot of money just to go to the ER just for them to tell me you need to see a specialist. And I already had an appointment. So I said, okay, I'm just gonna track this and thug it out. The pain was just crazy. And then I woke up the next morning and then boom, I was on my period. So in my mind, I was like, this is clearly a hormonal issue. So like Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it's acting up. It's getting larger. It's in pain. It's throbbing. And then by Friday, there was a huge rash up, like it was hot to the touch, and it was a huge bright red rash under my breast. And I was like, okay, this is crazy. And then when my period went away, the lump shrank down, the rash went away, and then the pain didn't happen again. Again, I'm like, clearly, this is hormonal.
It was all a lie. Guys, it was all a lie. She lied.
I just keep my little journal and my little notes, so when the doctors ask me what's going on, I can tell them everything and lay it all out for them. So when I go to my appointment on Monday, April 17th, I honestly was just expecting to just have the mammogram and the ultrasound, that they weren't going to say anything to me that day, that the next thing would be I was gonna have to wait 2 to 3 weeks just for them to be like, oh, we think something, and then let's have you come back for a biopsy just to make sure. And then I thought it was gonna be another 2 weeks before the biopsy was scheduled, and then go to the biopsy, and then wait another 2 to 3 weeks for that before I got an answer. I thought that's how it was gonna go. Wrong. Okay, well, we're gonna do the mammogram, and then you're gonna go sit in the waiting room and wait for like 30 minutes, and a doctor's gonna read it immediately. And then we're gonna have you go back to the breast ultrasound, and then a doctor's gonna come in and talk to you. I said, you're gonna talk to me today? And they said, we're talking to you today. Get the mammogram, and then I go in for the breast ultrasound, and whole vibe changes.
Girl, what's going on?
Whole vibe changed immediately. She's doing the breast ultrasound, and then she asked me, is this my first breast ultrasound? And I said, no, actually I paid out of pocket for one back in January, just because, you know, like I was kind of concerned. She immediately freaks out and she's like, do you have the results? And I was like, I have them in my phone. She stops, slides over, grabs my phone. She was like, pull up your phone right now. Pull up the results. She was like, I need to see the size that it was then versus what it is now. And I was just like, okay. So I gave her that information, and then she's like, okay, she was like, don't get dressed. I'm having the doctor come in. Now at this point, she's only done the right breast. And I was like, oh, you're only doing the right. You're not gonna do the left? She said, I ain't worried about that one. I said, ooh, okay. So the doctor comes in. She immediately just flips the screen and she's like, this is what I'm looking at. She was like, you have a very large concerning lump. And she was like, as well as a very large concerning lymph node in your armpit. And I was just like, okay. And then she was like, I'm really concerned about these borders. I already know when she said borders, I was like, that's giving kind of sketch. And then she immediately started rubbing my arm and tapping my arm. And she said, I need you to mentally prepare yourself emotionally and physically for bad news. And I fucking froze. And I said, excuse me? And she said, I know, but don't worry, you're in the best place possible. And treatment here, treatment? What the fuck what are we talking about at 10 o'clock on this here Monday morning? What are we talking about? And I gave her the rundown of everything, and I could just tell in her face that she already knew what it was. Part of me was angry that she was just so definitive to say, prepare yourself for bad news. Part of me was angry because I'm like, bitch, we don't have a receipt. We ain't sent shit to pathology. There's been no biopsy. Like, what are you talking about? But then the other part of me was, whatever it is, she's seen it a lot. And I was like, fuck. So when I told her everything, she just kept telling me, I'm so glad you're in tune with your body and you caught it when you did, so we can do what we need to do. And I'm like, what the fuck? So she was like, I need to get you in here immediately for a biopsy so we can get this set on. And she was like, so we can do what we need to do and get this party going and get this ball rolling. And I was like, yo, we're already talking about treatment? Like, okay. So I literally went back the very next morning at 7 o'clock in the morning for my biopsy. Now, the biopsy itself was actually very interesting because down here in Houston, they're all teaching hospitals, so you're bound to run into like a lot of students, which generally I don't mind. So when I got there were nurses that were in training from Baylor, and I was just like, oh, okay, no problem. What I didn't realize is that one of the physicians who was in on the biopsy, she was in training as well, and that bitch ain't know what she was doing, and that shit hurt so bad. But in that, having people that were in training in the room, there are very highly medical conversations that are happening around me. And fun fact, I have a degree in public and community health, and as part of my schooling, I was required to take anatomy and physiology 1 and 2. And I also had an elective where I had to take medical terminology. So y'all think y'all know shit just from watching Grey's Anatomy? I'm really that girl. We actually have a full understanding of conversations that were being had around me. This actually was kind of the time that I didn't want to know that shit. So they're having conversations. She's showing her, and she's saying things like, oh, with borders like this and fast growing ones like this. And I was like, they know exactly what they're looking at. Biopsy happened on Tuesday. Wednesday, I had a follow-up with my internist for some other lab work and things that we were trying to figure out that's going on with my body. And, she was like, I saw that you had your mammogram and ultrasound. And I said, yeah. And, I just told her, and I was like, she told me to prepare for bad news. And she was like, okay. So I just asked her, and I said, look, and I was like, I'm not from here. If this is what they think it is, I'm not from here. My whole support system is in Maryland. If it's something where it's treatment, do I stay here or do I go home? And she told me that while it is ultimately up to me, that I'm not going to receive any better care in the country than being in Houston, because I did not know Houston is the #1 place in the country for breast cancer research and treatment. God did his big one.
Yes, come on. I'm ready to have church. Glory to God. So, pasante koramandele bekutara bahai. God, I feel the tiki mandele besu. You better come on here.
She said, you're not going to get any better care anywhere else. And she was like, but even if you wanted to, the time it would take for us to switch your files and get you to a different physician, and there's no physician that's just going to just take our information and then start treatment. You're going to start the whole entire process over again, and basically we don't have time. So she said, I'm just going to tell you right now, you need to talk to your village and see who can take turns coming to see you. And I said, okay. So they call Friday morning and they're like, yes, it is breast cancer, and yes, the breast cancer is also in the lymph node. So they had to biopsy the lump in the breast and the lymph node to make sure it wasn't in both, because if the cancer was also in the lymph node, it was not 100%, but it meant that there was a possibility that it could be spreading throughout the body. So of course, once they tell me that it is in both, I am freaking out.
Good? No, you're not. You're not, baby, and it's okay. You're not good, and it's okay. You don't need to be good all the time. It's okay to not be good.
I did ask them what stage it was, and they were like, well, the thing about that is because the lymph node is involved, that changes things. Going off the size of the lump, it's stage 2, but the fact that it is in the lymph node, that changes things. So for exact staging, we need you to come back next Tuesday, and we need to do an MRI. And I'm like, okay. So I did the MRI. I also had to then go do a CAT scan to make sure it was nowhere else in my body, which it is not, thank God. I did do genetic testing as well, which I do not have any markers, but I want to make this point about doing genetic testing. When you meet with the genetic counselor, they'll ask you, and they literally will write down and do a family tree to figure out, is there anybody in your family, who has breast cancer or whatever it is that they're looking for. But the thing is, they only go back to your grandparents. And I knew for a fact, because I have an Ancestry.com account, and I found my great grandmother, my mother's paternal grandmother. I found her death certificate some years ago. And because I understand medical terminology, I saw her cause of death. And on her death certificate, at the age of 45, she died from breast cancer. So I told them that, and they just brushed me off, and they were like, well, we don't go back that far. And I was like, I'm not a geneticist, but I don't think that that's that far if we're talking about things, trickling down. But evidently I do not have any genetic markers for breast cancer. I did have them check me for everything else. Because apparently with my breast cancer, which is triple negative breast cancer, there is possibility of it spreading to like your liver, like your ovaries and your lungs. So I had them check me for everything. I said, I'm not going to just get checked just for this, because I'd be damned if I beat cancer and then like 2 years later my check engine light comes on and then it's something else. So in that regard, if there was something that came up like ovarian or uterine or anything like that, I would have just had a preemptive like hysterectomy or something like that. when I met with oncology, then on May 10th. At this point, I am just thinking that it's going to just be a lumpectomy and then do radiation. So when I found out that because I have a triple negative breast cancer, which is, it means that there's no genetic, there's no hormonal markers. So it's not HER2 positive, which means there are hormonal markers. So no hormonal markers. However, it is super aggressive, and it disproportionately affects women of color, and specifically Black women. So I am super grateful that I did not delay, and I was not waiting for more severe symptoms before getting anything checked out, because I technically found it at stage 1, and had I had health insurance and immediately went through with that, things, maybe could have been different. But I was told, because it is triple negative breast cancer, lumpectomy was not the route. It responds very, very well to chemo, so that was going to be the route. So that is how I found out that I have breast cancer. I have been documenting the journey. If you have not watched any of the other videos, please do so. But I wanted to share this story just to be very clear, and women advocating for themselves and their health, and to not ignore things, however small it may be. I believe that sometimes we ignore things. If we're talking about like the size of something, like when I found it was the size of a pea, but I think when you think in relation to the whole entire size of your body, you're like, oh, a pea. But I would urge people to think more in terms of like the size of the organ that it's potentially affecting. So like, for example, I said I've had 2 different surgeries to remove polyps from my uterus. Well, your uterus is only the size of a fist. The polyps that I've had removed are like the size of a Mike and Ike, and I always think about it like my pinky nail. And you're just like, oh, okay, a Mike and Ike. A Mike and Ike in relationship to your whole entire body, not that big of a deal. But when your uterus is only the size of your fist and you have a Mike and Ike fused to the back of it, it's pretty detrimental. And I had 3 of them. I just want women, and specifically women of color, to really advocate for themselves, and don't wait for the big symptom. Don't wait until there's a rash. Don't wait until your skin is puckering. Don't wait until there's discharge from your nipple. Don't wait until the pain is so severe. Not pain that you can ignore, like the pain. Just don't wait, and don't allow anyone to brush you off. Follow through and make them get to the end. If they're just like, oh, it's probably just hormonal, great, prove it. So I will be continuing to share my journey. I'm thinking of ways, what my life after breast cancer looks like, and how I give back, and how I'm going to give back and share with others in the community, and how I can hopefully save somebody's titties. If there's anything else that I can tell you, it is, if you have any concern, 1, don't necessarily wait until you are 40. If you feel like there is something there, please push. Oh, that's what I wanted to say. If you are getting a mammogram, if at all possible, that you can ask for a breast ultrasound in tandem with that, please do so. Get the things done. Just do it. I am grateful. I just wanted to share my story, because everybody's story is different. Everyone's diagnosis is different. Everyone's treatment path is different. But I just thought, sharing mine with the platform that I have, I thought it might be helpful to someone. So of course, if there are any questions you have in the comments, please leave them in the comments, and I would be more than happy to answer them. I love you, and thank you for anyone who's been following me on this journey up to this point, and can't wait till I continue to kick cancer's ass.